There are moments in our history, defining moments, when we are called to stand up, speak out, and remind ourselves of the values that built this nation. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. And in those moments, the truth has a way of cutting through the noise, of shining a light in the darkest corners, and of waking us up from the spell of apathy and distraction. Now, I've spent my life believing in the power of words. I've seen what happens when you tell the truth. Not a convenient truth, not a carefully crafted illusion, but the truth. That kind of truth doesn't shout. It doesn't insult. It doesn't belittle or mock. It stands steady. It holds firm. And it challenges us not to tear each other down, but to lift each other up. Because we're better than the politics of division. We're better than the impulse to bully, to boast, to lie so often and so boldly that facts start to feel irrelevant. That's not strength. That's not leadership. That's insecurity masquerading as power. That's fear dressing itself up as confidence. Real leadership doesn't come from tearing others down just to feel taller. It comes from building something bigger than yourself, something that lasts. Now, I understand that in times of uncertainty, when people feel left behind, it's easy to buy into a message of fear. It's tempting to believe that anyone can come in, shake things up, and make all the problems disappear. But democracy doesn't work like that. Change doesn't come from spectacle. It doesn't come from tweets. It comes from hard work, from policy, from integrity, from a willingness to tell the people not just what they want to hear, but what they need to know. And yes, truth matters. Character matters. Words matter. The Oval Office is not a reality show. It's not about ratings. It's not about ego. It's about responsibility. It's about the lives of people who wake up every morning praying their kids can go to school safely, that they can afford a doctor when they're sick, that their job will still be there tomorrow. That's what leadership is about. It's not entertainment. It's duty. I have faith. I always have faith in the idea that we can be better, that even when the bar is lowered, we can raise it back up, that the arc of the moral universe, as Dr. King said, is long, but it bends toward justice. It doesn't bend on its own. We have to reach for it. We have to pull it. We have to work for it. So when someone tells you that facts don't matter, that decency is weakness, that cruelty is strength, I want you to remember who we are. I want you to remember that hope is not blind optimism. Hope is that stubborn thing inside us that insists, despite all evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits us if we're willing to work for it. Truth and integrity are not optional virtues in leadership. They are the foundation. They are what separate those who lead for the people from those who lead for themselves. When a leader chooses to speak truth, even when it's inconvenient or unpopular, they are choosing to respect the people they serve. Because the truth honors the intelligence of the citizen. It says, you deserve to know what's real, not just what's easy. That kind of honesty is rare, and it's powerful. It builds trust, not overnight, not with slogans or applause lines, but steadily, moment by moment, decision by decision. Integrity, on the other hand, is what a leader does when no one is watching. It's whether you keep your word when it costs you something, whether you treat people with dignity, not just your supporters, but those who disagree with you, whether you can admit when you're wrong. It's not about perfection. It's about accountability, about taking responsibility for your actions and understanding the weight your words carry. We've seen what happens when leaders abandon these principles. When truth becomes negotiable and integrity is cast aside in favor of winning the next news cycle or dominating the next headline. When lies are repeated so often they start to feel normal and decency is dismissed as weakness. That's not just a personal failure, it's a threat to the health of a democracy. Because when people can no longer believe what they hear from their leaders, when the facts are twisted or buried beneath a mountain of spin, they begin to disengage, stop participating. They lose faith, not just in a politician, but in the system itself. And when that happens, the ground shakes. The foundations begin to crack. Because democracy isn't sustained by force. It's sustained by trust. Trust that leaders are telling the truth. Trust that rules apply to everyone, not just the privileged. Trust that even when times are tough, the people at the top are working in the interest of the whole, not just themselves. That's why truth and integrity matter, not because they're easy to live by, but because they're hard, because they demand restraint. They demand discipline. They demand that a leader be more than just charismatic. They must be ethical. They must be principled. And they must be willing to sacrifice their own comfort for the greater good. People can disagree on policy, They can argue over taxes, healthcare, foreign affairs. That's the essence of democracy. But what should never be up for debate is whether truth matters. What should never be questioned is whether integrity is optional. Because once we let go of those values, we open the door to chaos, to cynicism, to leaders who would rather divide than unite. And we become something less than what our founders envisioned and far less than what our children deserve. Leadership is not about grabbing attention. It's not about putting on a show or chasing the next headline. Real leadership, lasting, meaningful leadership, is about service. It's about the quiet, steady work of moving people forward. It doesn't rely on applause. It doesn't need a spotlight. It relies on principle, on conviction, and on the understanding that every decision affects real lives. You don't govern through drama. You govern through discipline. A leader's job isn't to entertain. It's to enlighten. It's to listen, to understand the needs of the people, and to act in a way that honors the trust they've placed in you. That kind of leadership doesn't thrive in chaos. It thrives in clarity. It doesn't seek conflict for the sake of conflict. It seeks solutions. That's not always glamorous. It's not always flashy, but it's what keeps a society moving forward. In this age of social media and constant noise, it's easy to mistake attention for accomplishment, but making headlines doesn't mean you're making progress. Being loud doesn't mean you're being strong. And just because people are talking about you doesn't mean you're leading them anywhere worth going. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about having the clearest vision and the deepest commitment to doing what's right, even when it's hard. A leader understands the weight of their words. They understand that stirring up anger might get a reaction, but it doesn't get results. It might get clicks, but it doesn't build schools. It doesn't heal communities. It doesn't strengthen alliances or fix roads or create jobs. And it certainly doesn't bring people together. Real leadership doesn't inflame. It inspires. It doesn't pit neighbor against neighbor. It builds bridges across our differences. That's the difference between a performer and a public servant. A performer plays to the crowd, says what people want to hear, and moves on to the next act. But a public servant rolls up their sleeves, dives into the details, and sticks around long enough to fix what's broken. They don't avoid responsibility, they embrace it, because they know the work isn't about them. It's about the people they serve. And service demands sacrifice. It demands humility. It demands a willingness to put country over ego. Leadership means showing up, even when the cameras are off. It means making the tough calls, not because they're popular, but because they're necessary. It means standing firm when it's easier to fold, telling the truth when it's tempting to lie, and reaching out when it would be simpler to retreat. That's not easy. It never has been, but it's the only way to earn the trust of a free people. And when you lead from a place of service, not self-interest, you create something stronger than loyalty. You create unity. You create resilience. You create a foundation that no scandal, no slogan, no stunt can shake. Because leadership grounded in service will always outlast leadership built on spectacle. Democracy is not a performance. It's not something that happens to us. It's something we do together. It's the slow, steady work of citizens who care enough to stay involved and leaders who care enough to be honest about the hard road ahead. It doesn't promise instant results or easy victories. It demands effort. It demands participation. And it demands accountability from both those in power and those who put them there. We live in a time when it's tempting to believe that one person can sweep in and solve everything with a signature, with a soundbite, with a show of force. But that's not how a democracy works. That's not how change is made. Real change comes from organizing, from debate, from compromise and persistence. It's forged in school board meetings, in community halls, in late night sessions of Congress where tough choices are made and real lives hang in the balance. And let me tell you, change is hard. Policy is hard. Governing is hard because every decision has consequences and every solution creates new challenges. That's why democracy isn't built on charisma. It's built on character. It's built on the understanding that being elected doesn't mean you know everything. It means you've been given a responsibility to learn, to grow, and to lead with humility. That kind of leadership doesn't tweet its way through crisis. It doesn't treat the government like a business deal. It doesn't measure success by applause or attention. It measures success by whether families are better off, whether our veterans are cared for, whether our schools are improving, whether justice is being served not just for some, but for all. That kind of progress takes time, and it takes people willing to do the hard, sometimes thankless work of making government serve its true purpose. You don't get there by tearing everything down just because it's old. You don't get there by replacing experience with outrage. You don't get there by promising everything and delivering nothing. Democracy isn't a shortcut. It's a process. And that process requires leaders who are rooted in facts, not fantasy, who speak with clarity, not confusion, who recognize that slogans can win elections, but they don't fix roads or write laws or build coalitions. And accountability, well, that's the heartbeat of democracy. It's what keeps leaders honest. It's what ensures that promises aren't just made, but kept. That power isn't just taken, but earned. When a leader knows they'll be held to account, they lead differently. They think twice. They consult the experts. They tell the truth, even when it's hard, because they know the people are watching, not for entertainment, but for leadership. We cannot abandon that process just because it's slow. We cannot trade in hard-earned progress for the illusion of easy answers. Because once we lose faith in the work, once we stop believing that honest, deliberate effort can change our lives, then democracy becomes just another word. And that's not the legacy we want to leave behind. Words are not just sounds we make. They carry meaning. They shape perception. They can heal or they can harm. And when those words come, some from someone in a position of power, when they come from a leader, they carry even more weight. They can bring people together in a moment of crisis. They can calm a nation, or they can fan the flames of division and fear. That is why character and words are not small matters in leadership. They are everything. When a leader speaks, the world listens. But more importantly, the people listen. The teacher trying to inspire a classroom, the parent trying to reassure a child, the worker wondering if their job is secure. And what that leader chooses to say can either lift those people up or leave them feeling more anxious, more uncertain, more alone. Because leadership isn't just about what you do. It's about what you say and how you say it. You can't lead a diverse and complex nation with sarcasm and spite. You can't inspire people with cruelty or lead with insults. A leader sets the tone, the way they treat others, their opponents, their critics, even strangers. Sets the bar for what's acceptable in public life. When decency is dismissed as political correctness, when kindness is seen as weakness, we don't just coarsen our discourse. We poison the well of trust that democracy depends on. Character is revealed not when the cameras are on, but when the pressure's high and the choices are tough. It shows in how a leader treats those who have nothing to offer in return. It shows in where they tell the truth when lies would be more convenient. And it shows in whether they accept responsibility when things go wrong, instead of looking for someone else to blame. That's character. That's what people remember. That's what defines a legacy. Words matter. They can be a bridge or a wall. They can open minds or close hearts. When a leader chooses their words with care, when they speak with honesty and empathy, they remind us of our common humanity. They remind us that we are not enemies. We are neighbors. We are citizens. We are part of something bigger than ourselves. But when a leader chooses to mock, to divide, to lie boldly and frequently, they send a different message egg. That power matters more than principle. That noise is more important than truth. We've seen the damage that careless, reckless language can do. We've seen what happens when leaders encourage suspicion over solidarity, cynicism over hope. And the scars of that kind of leadership don't fade quickly. Because once trust is broken, it's hard to rebuild. That's why the character of those we choose to lead us is not a secondary concern. It's the starting point. Leadership is a test of temperament. It's a test of discipline. And above all, it's a test of character. Because in the end, people won't just remember what a leader built or what they passed or what they promised. They'll remember how they made them feel, whether they were lifted up or left behind. Hope is not naive. It's not some blind faith that things will magically get better. It's not ignoring the challenges or pretending everything is fine when it isn't. Hope is stubborn. It's that quiet voice at the end of the day that says, try again tomorrow. It's what keeps people going when the odds are stacked against them, when the road ahead is uncertain, and when fear starts knocking at the door. And for a democracy to survive, for a nation to rise above division and despair, that hope has to live not just in our hearts, but in our actions. Hope doesn't mean avoiding the truth. In fact, it demands that we face it, that we acknowledge what's broken, what's unjust, what's holding us back, and still believe that we have the power to fix it. Because we do, we always have. But we only unlock that power when we come together, when we roll up our sleeves, and when we refuse to give up on each other. That's when hope turns into progress. Hope doesn't come from speeches. It comes from seeing the impossible made possible. It comes from ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Marching in the streets, standing in line to vote, starting a business in a tough neighborhood, teaching in underfunded schools, raising a family with dignity, even when the paycheck barely stretches to the end of the month. These people don't have time for cynicism. They live on hope. Not the kind that waits around, but the kind that works. But hope requires something else too. It requires courage. It takes courage to believe that tomorrow can be better, especially when today is hard. It takes courage to stand up when others sit down, to speak up when others stay silent. And it takes courage to keep going when the progress is slow, when setbacks feel personal, and when the easy choice would be to quit. But hope doesn't quit. Hope endures. There will always be those who tell you it's foolish to hope, that the system is rigged, that the other side is the enemy, that nothing will ever change. But those voices have been around forever. They were there when people said slavery would never end, when women were told they didn't belong in the voting booth, when workers were told they'd never earn a fair wage. And yet, change came. Not because people gave in to despair, but because they believed in something better, and they were willing to work for it. That's the kind of hope we need now, not a passive hope, not a comfortable hope, but a hope that pushes us, that challenges us, that says we're not finished yet. We still have work to do. We still have bridges to build and wrongs to right. And no matter how long it takes, no matter how steep the climb, we are going to keep walking. Not because it's easy, not because someone else is going to do it for us, but because deep down, we know something better is always worth fighting for. So in this moment, with all its noise and division, with all its challenges and uncertainty, we have a choice to make. A choice about what kind of country we want to be. A choice about what kind of leaders we're willing to follow and what kind of people we're willing to become. Will we give in to fear, to anger, to the temptation of easy answers and empty promises? Or will we choose the harder path, the path of truth, of decency, of courage, and unity? Because the future isn't something that just happens. It's something we shape together with our voices, with votes, with our values. And no matter how dark the hour may seem, I believe deeply firmly that if we hold on to what's right, if we stand up for what's true, if we lead not with pride, but with purpose, then the American story is far from over. In fact, the next chapter may be our finest yet.